the four key characteristics we identify in the reinvention of loyalty: predictive, prevalent, choice, and experience. So when we look at predictive technologies, we are talking about data-driven engagements. So we're recognizing that we can use data about consumers to create more meaningful interactions for them through predicting what they may or may not want or the way that they want to engage with the brand. Prevalence, so we need to be in everywhere, and this is similar to mental and physical availability. We need to see brands that are engaging across all formats in all kinds of forums, and it's very, very critical. Choice, so we talked a little bit about intermediation. So in our study, we looked at the importance that aggregators can play and the way in which they can help consumers make choices. We also see now the emergence of artificial intelligence services as an intermediary layer. We think it's going to be critical over the next 2 or 3 years that brands get much more mature and sophisticated about how they market to algorithms. We're now going to see an enormous growth in the fields of algorithmic optimization for things like voice services, chatbots, artificial intelligence coaches and advisors. These intermediary layers are going to be sitting between the brand and the consumer. They're also going to be capturing an awful lot of data about the consumer that the brand doesn't have access to. And the last area is meaningful. And this is an area that links very strongly to experience. And so we understand that most brands these days are trying really hard to create experience-based businesses. And I think that's at the very core of the value. And in this area, we see the emergence of mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, all kinds of new services which can create richer, more dynamic, more immersive environments in which consumers are choosing. But ultimately, that still comes down to meaningful experiences. And by meaningful, I mean, again, the idea that we're not just servicing the immediate wants and needs of the consumer, but we're contributing something of value to their everyday lives. Well, this is really one of the first studies that really investigated how consumers engage directly with AI services and what their feelings and thoughts would be about those things. We know some things. We know, for example, that people tend to trust machines in a different way than they trust human beings. People can be self-conscious when they're dealing with human beings. They can worry about being judged. They can worry about the attitude of the other person and how that might affect what they might present. They might, for example, present themselves in a way that they want to be perceived rather than the real vision. And when they deal with AI services, suddenly all of that breaks down. You start to see a more transparent, a more authentic, interaction. And I think it's a very promising opportunity for brands to try to engage consumers with AI services because of this different mentality that they have towards dealing with machines or smart algorithms rather than people. So the loyalty bot is an artificial intelligence bot that engages directly with consumers in real time to capture their thoughts, their feelings, their inclinations, so that we get as close as possible to the moment when these decisions are being taken, and we get as close as possible to their understanding of what they're thinking and what's involved in making decisions around loyalty. In this world of proliferation of choice, in digital and cultural transformation, we also see a new consumer emerging. We call that consumer the emerging self. That's a consumer that's responding to this changing consumer behaviors as a result of the changing culture and also the changes that are brought by digital transformation. A lot of the theory says, don't surprise and delight them. Don't make it meaningful for them. Just be there, be prevalent, resonant, be available. We found actually that that's not enough, that for consumers, they need meaningful interactions. And to get those meaningful interactions, brands have to think quite carefully about how they engage. When you think about brands that already engage people around loyal considerations, they already have these kinds of things at the forefront, and it's in the culture. It's not just value, but it's values. And there's a very big difference between those. You're not trying to treat the consumer like a commodity and squeeze as much value as you can out of them. You're trying to engage with them around a set of values that you can share with the consumer. And a lot of that will come down to things like, are you responsible with the data that you capture about me? Are you using it in a way that contributes and adds value to my life and aligns with my values. The data comes back, and when we get that, we start to look at it and say, okay, where are the trends here that are meaningful? One thing we see right away is that 51% of consumers would purchase from a brand they've never heard of before just based on a recommendation. And so we see a new dynamic of trust emerging. We see a kind of network effect amongst consumers. And if a consumer trusts a brand and then they share that brand capital with another consumer, then that can have a huge impact on that consumer's purchasing decisions. So in that way, you can be loyal to a brand you've never heard of before because somebody that you trust, a person like you, is loyal to that brand and they've made a recommendation that you might be interested or engaged with it as well. These platforms are critical to the engagement that occurs. The engagement has to occur somewhere, and it happens to occur most typically now in contemporary brand engagements in social media, in these platforms where there's an opportunity to engage not just with the brand, but with others, people like you, who have also either previously engaged with the brand or are looking to engage with the brand. It is important to understand that consumers are valuing them in a different way than marketers are, and potentially that therein lies an opportunity, which is to recognize that predictive and prevalence and choice are critical, but that they need to contribute to more meaningful experiences for consumers, and that at a paramount, the culture of the brand has to be looking at that as the key dimension of shaping their new engagement and loyalty with consumers.